Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for Sofia for doing this important work. I read the report, and I find it very clear, very well structured. So I definitely recommend anyone who is listening to us first to read. Now, what I was thinking to do is mainly comment the report and the different maybe challenges or conclusion of Sofia in the following 10 minutes. So the first thing that I saw in the when reading the report is her attempt to establish numbers. You know, it's always everyone who is working in France. It's always a hobby to try to understand numbers. You know, whether you were in math class or not before when you were young. But this is something very exhausting, and I could see from the report that Sofia had a lot of trouble in getting some numbers. And as all of us, by the way, and then you really depend on having some friends in this office or having another connection in that bureau. And maybe this could be the first recommendation. Please be clear about numbers. How many people are detained in Syria? How many women? How many children? How many are repatriated? How many are going to be repatriated? This is one thing. Second kind of number, how many people have been persecuted? What was the punishment? I mean, all this should be publicly available information. It should be open information. And researchers in French really lose a lot of energy in finding those basic issues, you know, before even going to the analyze. And once they have the numbers, they feel, oh, okay, it's good. We made our research, you know. So I'm sure everyone who worked in France knows exactly what I'm speaking about. So this is first thing. And, you know, when I was working on the Guantanamo trial, which is, you know, you can hardly compare the trial in Paris and in Guantanamo, but at least in Guantanamo, you have a website and you have all the decision online, and, you know, it's really accessible in this sense. So if they could do this for Guantanamo, I'm sure that they could do this in France. So this will be my first recommendation, please. For the government, provide data, clear data, because they have this data. I know that in every judge office they have these wonderful tables of how many people and how many punishment, etc. And we researchers should have this, and also the public is allowed to have this information easily accessible. So this was my first remark. My second remark will go to the question of international criminal law and preventive law, which was very clearly presented by Sofia. So I can just join what she has said. Now, I mean, even the ICL framework of the preventive framework, these are really the framework that exclude each other, right? Because the idea here is to do preventive law, counterterrorism law. What is interesting in France is when these people will come back to France, we want to make sure that no terror acts are going to be made in France. So everything, actually all their action in Syria or wherever they went or they plan to go, in itself, it is relevant. What is relevant is what do we want to prevent here in France from happening? So, you know, this kind of reasonement is very hard, of course, for victims of international crime in Syria. So if someone was a victim of a rape, of torture of a French foreign fighter, frankly, in France, no one's interested in this action, actually. What is they are interested here is to prevent the terrorism, and this is the association malfaiteur that they will face on trial, and not at all about whether they torture or not. And it's not always the question of evidence, because, you know, some guys really took good videos of themselves cutting head and etc. So we could have the evidence, but it's simply not what is we are talking about. So this is one thing. And of course, so we have there are a lot of international criminal law cases in France, you know, against random people, against Syrian, against based on universal jurisdiction. I think we're maybe one of the jurisdiction with the most ongoing investigation. maybe not yet in prosecution, but there are dozens, if not hundreds of cases. But again, it's on universal jurisdiction, so it will be for foreign people who committed those crimes, whether in Syria or in other contexts. But French people will be prosecuted in the context of terrorism. Now, there is one exception that Sofia mentioned in her report, is the company Lafarge, that is a cement company that had a factory in Syria, in a place that were under the control of ISIS. And in order to continue the factory, they were paying money ISIS in order to be able to continue to work there. And here they started an investigation of abating war crime, I think, or assisting war crimes, or something like this. So here we can see that we have the use of the international criminal law against a French company. But why did it happen? It happened because we had a complaint, right? You had people making this complaint before the investigative judge, and this is how the investigation started. It was by an NGO, Sherpa, who is working on those questions. And of course, you won't have those kind of things, an individual coming back from Syria, because or the victims simply, are not there, or they don't recognize whatever. So it's not only about evidence and whatever. Sometimes it's related to the rule of procedure and the question of complaint. But of course, there could be also investigation without the victims. So this is about the question of international criminal law and terrorism. Now, about the question of repatriation, I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, the number, if I remember well, it's something like 200, maybe, women and children. I don't remember well the numbers, but it's nothing. Come on. So, of course, France is a big country, and they have all what is necessary to accommodate those people, or through the justice system, or through special treatment for the kids. And I mean, the kids, they are victims. The kids are victims, and it's about time to treat them as such. They are not ticking bombs, and they are not whatever people try to call them. They are kids, sometimes French kids, or at least of French parents. And it's normal that the country should protect them. I think that they are entitled even to be recognized as victims of terrorism. This is what we had once, a trial in France of a couple. And Constance was, we were with Constance observing this trial. It was a month ago, I think. You have a man and a woman that were together. A man that went there, and the woman that joined the man with their 2 kids, if I'm not wrong. And then they came back, and now the kids are, in different families and etc. But of course, for me, those children are victim of the acts of their parents, a victim of terrorism. So this is how those kids should be treated. And the woman, whatever they did, they could be prosecuted if they did. If they didn't, they shouldn't. But it's ridiculous to speak about 200 person and not being able to repatriate them. This is really a political choice, a kind of a revenge or whatever. And now that we have the European Court decision, I think it put quite pressure on France. And I mean, at the end, they will repatriate them all. So I don't see the question why to do it so slowly, especially that from security reason, we all understand that it's more dangerous to have them there than to have them here under a different system of rehabilitation in prisons, etc. So this was about the question of the repatriation. Now, the question of resource. So I don't know, it's the first time that I have heard that there are not enough resources. There are so much resources in the counterterrorism justice system. I mean, I don't think there is anywhere else with so much resources. And to the point that I think that today, the PNAT and all the counterterrorism services, investigation and investigative judges and prosecution, they got so much that, as Sofia said, now it's a bit, in slowdown. And I wonder what they're going to do with all those resources, because as in manpower, they have a lot of judges there. if there is less terrorism cases, probably something will need to be done. But again, for a French system, even if we're speaking about 2,000 cases, I mean, it's not lack of resources. There are more than enough resources, and you can just see how much the trial of the Bataclan and Charlie Hebdo, how much those trials cost, you know. So there is not lack of money, but it's lack of political will. And of course, in this sense, it's easier to do AMT, Association Malfaiteur. It's easier, it's less resources are required, and you can get the same or maybe even harsher punishment. So I want just to mention here, maybe what we should also give credit to French system is that it is a slow justice system. The justice system takes the time, at least in the hearing, to hear the accused. They are heard in length. Maybe 1 day, 2 days could be dedicated to their story, to their background. We will have the family coming, giving testimony. We will have the old boss, whatever, you know, to understand not only what he did, but also his environment. So in this sense, there is a very sociological approach, let's say, to the crime in this sense, to put his life into a context. And this is why we have very interesting story of radicalization and how this could have happened in courtroom. So the only critique that I will have on this is that we don't have transcription, and it goes back to what we said before about, you know, the transparency of the justice system. Of course, it's transparent. So me and Constance, we can be there and take notes, but as the journalist, but we won't have an official transcript. And this is a pity, because this could be a very useful sources for researcher, also to understand this socio-political phenomenon, right? Because it's maybe the only place where you have the space where you can hear from the person themselves what happened to them, and not through different, you know, second-hand testimonies. Maybe in trial and in prison, this is where you can find the people. Then yes, about the prison. So this will be my last comment. Indeed, the prison is a very important space. When you have the in and out of prison, also when you are in trial, actually, because it's quite interesting, because they've been arrested like maybe 2-3 years. In the Bataclan case, it was 5 years, even more, you know. So all this time of detention, things are happening in prison, and then the justice is informed of this prison, you know, behavior or what happened in prison. So there is a kind of fluidity between the prison and the trial. And then, of course, after in prison, it will be very important to do the you know, the good job of rehabilitation. I'm not an expert on prison. I'm not sure the extent that it has been done. The problem is that all the time there are programs, and then they change, and other programs, and then there is another director of prison that is doing another program, you know. So people, there is like a turnover of people, and things are, the policies are changing. I don't see a clear rehabilitation programs in prison, which is a pity. And I forgot to say about, you know, about the lack of resources and the slow justice system, that in France, when you do appeal, like the big trials, things of the Marat trial, Bataclan, Charlie Hebdo, whatever, all the little trials of the returnees, when you're doing an appeal, you do a retrial. So it's also about the lack of resources, you know. It's not an efficient system, the justice system in France, which I think it's positive, because the question of money is not necessarily what is leading the reflection, you know. Yeah, so I think this is at least the good thing that we have there, so we can really be aware of the different stories. Okay, and I will stop there. Thank you for the time.